On the morning of April 26, 1997, a thin layer of fog still covered the peaceful village of Chingko. On the winding dirt road leading to the end of the village, a man hurried toward the gate of Mr. Praphat Bunthawee's house, the head of the local health station. They had a work meeting scheduled for early that morning. But when he arrived, an unusual silence enveloped the house. This was completely different from the bustling daily rhythm of a 5-person family. An uneasy feeling crept into the man's heart. His calls at the door echoed into the air, but no one answered. The following knocks also received only thick silence. The wooden door was tightly bolted from the inside, and the windows were half closed as if hiding something. His bad intuition prompted the colleague to decide to peer through the narrow door crack to observe the situation inside. Time seemed to stop in that moment. The image that appeared before his eyes made him freeze in place, a bare foot hanging in the air about 18 inches from the ground. The toes were curled, the skin was pale blue, and the ankles were swollen purple like traces of cruel tightening. Instinct urged him to run, but his eyes seemed magnetized, unable to leave the narrow crack. Light from the back of the house cast forward, enough to reveal the entire haunting scene. Not just one, but 4 pairs of human feet, all hanging in a row from the stair railing, motionless like soulless mannequins. Deathly silence enveloped the house. His breathing gradually became labored, cold sweat rolling down his back, soaking his shirt. The brutal reality gradually became clear. These were the 4 family members of Mr. Praphat, familiar faces he could recognize immediately without needing to see them clearly. His knees suddenly went weak, and he collapsed to the ground in shock. The whole world seemed to spin, his body numb and unable to move. It took a while before he could regain some strength, stagger to his feet, and run toward the village to report the tragedy he had just witnessed. Tragedy had struck the previously peaceful village. Local police quickly arrived on the scene, and what they discovered made even experienced investigators shudder. All 5 members of Mr. Praphat's family had died under tragic circumstances, marking one of the most brutal crimes ever recorded in Thai criminal history. The victims included the head of household Praphat, 42 years old, his gentle wife Gyamchit Bunthawee, 38 years old, and their 3 sons, Kampanat, 13 years old, Chachawan, 11 years old, and Pranan, only 9 years old. The scene left haunting details. Mr. Praphat and his 3 children were found hanging from the staircase, while Mrs. Gyamchit lay unconscious on the bed with her hands and feet bound, her face and head covered in wounds, clear signs of savage attacks with a hard object. Notably, there were no signs that the victims had tried to resist. This suggested they may have been completely subdued before the tragedy occurred. Additionally, many valuable items had disappeared from the house, including jewelry and a collection of paintings and antique Buddha prayer beads that the family had accumulated over many years. From these initial clues, investigators concluded that this was most likely a carefully planned murder robbery, not an impulsive act. The Bunthawee family massacre immediately became the center of Thai public attention. The Royal Thai Police quickly got involved with the highest determination. From the villagers, they learned that Mr. Praphat was a dedicated healthcare worker respected by the people. His wife, Mrs. Gyamchit, was also a local healthcare worker at the district health center. They lived with their 3 sons at house number 162, Hamlet 8, Chingko subdistrict, where the massacre occurred. In the days before the tragedy struck, a rumor had spread throughout this quiet rural area. People whispered to each other that Mr. Praphat had just sold a piece of fertile land, or possibly a famous fighting bull, earning up to 1 million baht. For the poor rural community at that time, this was truly an enormous sum. It was precisely this seemingly harmless rumor that became the spark that ignited the greed of local criminals. Investigators determined that local criminals had heard this information and believed that Mr. Praphat's family was hiding this huge sum of money somewhere in the house. Moreover, they may have secretly observed and learned the family's daily habits to choose the most appropriate time to act. However, the excessive brutality of the case created enormous pressure for the manhunt. In the late 1990s, forensic science was still in its infancy. DNA analysis or fingerprint analysis from the crime scene could take weeks to produce results. Pressed by the serious nature of the case, police forces deployed investigations in every possible direction, interrogating numerous suspects with criminal records in the area. However, after days of relentless work, they still had not found any breakthrough clues. The turning point came in early May 1997, when an important clue unexpectedly emerged from a distant place. The nephew of the village headman in Thano district, Yala province in southern Thailand, had contacted the police to report a suspicious incident. According to his account, just a few days after the shocking massacre, two strangers had come to the village headman's house. They carried a bag full of antique Buddha statues and valuable prayer beads, appearing to want to donate them. When asked about their origin, the two men simply gave the excuse that they found them on the road and wanted to offer them as donations. This immediately aroused the nephew's suspicion. In this impoverished rural area, few people could afford to give away such valuable treasures for free, especially to complete strangers. Moreover, when he observed more carefully, he discovered that some of the Buddha statues being donated had characteristics identical to those described in news reports about the collection stolen from Mr. Praphat's family. This information was like lightning cutting through the dark night of investigation. Upon receiving the report, the special investigation team acted quickly. From detailed descriptions of the two suspects, their identities gradually became clear, opening new hope in solving the case. The first suspect was Ruangsak Thongkun, 22 years old, commonly known by the nickname Sak Pakro, a name no longer unfamiliar in local criminal records. He had previous convictions for theft and was known as a local troublemaker. Sak's wandering life began when he left his family, renting a place near a high school despite no longer attending classes. Instead of books, he chose to associate with bad elements, building relationships in the petty criminal world. The second suspect was Songkran Kyo Ubon, an 11th grade student locally. Unlike his accomplice, Songkran had no criminal record, but had fallen into Sak's recruitment net with tempting words. "If you want to make money to spend, just follow me." Although not told the complete plan, the young student still agreed to participate as a lookout. This youthful decision ultimately drew him into the vortex of crime. Notably, both had mysteriously disappeared from the local area on the very night after the massacre occurred, a clear sign that they had prepared in advance. A nationwide manhunt was issued immediately. Through investigating their network of relatives, police quickly sketched out the escape route of the criminal duo. After donating gifts to the village headman in Yala, Sak had chosen his first hiding place, his aunt's house in Songkhla City. As soon as they had this information, the special investigation team immediately set out, beginning a cross-country pursuit. But unfortunately, when the pursuit force arrived, they were one step behind. The aunt, with a worried expression, recounted that just that morning, her nephew had hurriedly boarded a bus to Kanchanaburi, a distant western province of Thailand, with the reason that he needed to visit another aunt. Despite their disappointment, the pursuit team's spirit remained undaunted. They decided to continue the journey of more than 600 miles to the distant land of Kanchanaburi. This was not just a geographical pursuit, but also a race against time. Every hour that passed was an opportunity for the criminals to disappear completely. May 21, 1997 marked another concentrated effort. Local police and the special investigation team coordinated to create a tight cordon around the second aunt's house area. However, luck once again turned its back on them. The house was empty, with no trace of Sak. However, experienced investigators all shared a strong feeling. The prey had not gone far. There was something in the air, in the way Sak moved, that suggested he was still nearby. The investigators' intuition was not wrong. Indeed, that afternoon, at a small newspaper stand in the middle of the bustling district market, an unexpected scene unfolded. A young man was intently reading a newspaper, his eyes glued to the front page with large headlines about the Bunthawee family massacre. His unusually focused attitude immediately caught the attention of the patrol force. And that was Sak Pakro, the man they had been hunting for weeks. Perhaps curiosity had betrayed him. Instead of hiding completely, Sak could not resist the urge to follow the progress of the manhunt, wanting to know how far the police had come in tracking him down. A fatal mistake that many criminals often make. Without giving him another second to react, the detective force struck like lightning, subduing him on the spot. Sak's stunned, bewildered expression when captured showed he had no idea he had fallen into their sights. After 25 days of tense hiding, the ringleader had finally been unable to escape the arms of justice. Meanwhile, at another location, results were also ripening. A parallel investigation team had identified Songkran Kayo Uban's hiding place in Songkhla province. News of Sak's capture had spread quickly, and perhaps realizing that the escape had come to an end, Songkran had made a wise decision: voluntarily surrender to enjoy lenient policies. In his initial statement, he confessed to being present at the scene on the fateful night of April 25th, but insisted his role was limited to accompanying. Songkran appeared shocked to learn that Sak had actually killed the entire victim family, something he claimed he had never known beforehand and had never thought possible. In the interrogation room, Songkran gradually revealed the entire truth. He admitted to planning the robbery of the 1 million baht with Sak, but insisted his role was only to stand outside and observe. When he witnessed Sak beginning violent action, Songkran had fallen into a state of extreme panic at the cruelty that exceeded all imagination of his accomplice. What Songkran recounted completely matched Sak's confession about the scene in that fateful house. According to Sak's description, Songkran had stood at the bottom of the staircase, trembling and screaming in desperation for him to stop. But ultimately, fear had rendered him powerless, unable to prevent the tragedy. Nevertheless, although Songkran did not directly act, investigators determined that both must bear legal responsibility for the deaths of the 5 innocent victims. The complicity from the planning stage meant he could not escape the charges. At the police station, the confrontation with Sak Pakro was a completely different story. Initially, he appeared stubborn, evasively denying all charges with the typically obstinate attitude of hardened criminals. But when evidence was gradually presented before him, and realizing there was no escape route, Sak finally agreed to speak. What followed made even experienced investigators shudder. Sak's attitude when recounting each detail of the crime journey showed no remorse or fear whatsoever. He spoke calmly, sometimes even showing satisfaction, as if boasting about an achievement to be proud of. The afternoon of April 25th, 1997, an ordinary weekend day, had become the beginning of a chain of horrific events. The 3 boys, Kampanat, Chachawan, and Pranan, happily returned from school, as usual coming home earlier than their parents, who were still busy with work at the health station. The familiar door opened, but instead of the warm family space, what awaited them was a trap that had been prepared. 2 strange figures suddenly rushed out from dark corners, lightning fast, restraining each child before they could react. Ropes tightened around small hands and feet, cloth-gagged mouths. Everything happened too quickly for the 3 children to call for help. Not long after, the familiar footsteps of Mrs. Jiamchit rang out outside the door. As soon as she set foot in the house, she was immediately subdued, tied up, and dragged upstairs and thrown onto the bed. By this time, all 4 mother and children were in the enemy's hands, but what was terrifying was that the 2 criminals were not yet in a hurry to act. They were patiently waiting for the main target, Mr. Praphat. Late that evening, Mr. Praphat returned home tired after a long day caring for patients at the local health station. As soon as he pushed the door open, he was immediately attacked by 2 thugs, brutally restraining his hands and feet. The cold blade gleamed under the dim light. The threatening voice of the ringleader rang out, "Tell us where you hide the money!" Despite recognizing the dangerous situation of his entire family, Mr. Praphat still tried to remain calm and replied, "I don't have any money." Mr. Praphat's straightforward answer was like a small spark that ignited a fierce rage. The rumor about the huge sum of 1 million baht from selling land or fighting bulls had eaten deep into the minds of the 2 robbers, driving them to put effort into coming to this place. When they heard Mr. Praphat's denial, greed made them lose their reason, unable to believe that the treasure they had hoped for did not exist at all. From a simple robbery, the situation quickly escalated into a bloody execution. Sak Pakro, the cold-blooded ringleader, had decided to use the most cruel method to threaten Mr. Praphat. He would torture his most beloved family members before his eyes. Mrs. Giamchit became the first victim of this insane plan. Before the painful witness of her husband and children, the woman had to endure brutal beatings from the killer. Mr. Praphat's desperate pleas, "Please punish me instead of my wife and children," rang out like a final cry for help, but met only the absolute coldness of Sak. After just a few minutes of enduring savage acts, Mrs. Giamchit's last breath was extinguished right on the family bed. She had become the first victim in this tragedy. The scene of his wife being murdered before his eyes caused Mr. Praphat to collapse completely, fainting in despair. But for Sak Pakro, this was just the beginning. With limitless cruelty, he turned to the innocent children. In his later confession, with a chillingly cold tone, Sak described in detail how he successively finished off the 3 children. He had put ropes around each child's neck, then kicked them off the stair steps, leaving the small victims dangling from the railing. 3 cruel ropes had taken the lives of 3 innocent children. When Mr. Praphat gradually regained consciousness, the horrific scene before his eyes was like a nightmare from which he could not wake. His beloved wife and 3 dear children had all died in the most tragic circumstances. The ultimate pain could not be expressed in words, but the tragedy had not yet ended. Sak Pakro, the cold-blooded killer, had prepared the final rope for the head of household himself. Without declaration, without emotion, he had put the rope around Mr. Praphat's neck and pushed him hard from the 2nd floor. That cruel push had ended the life of a good man, closing the bloody tragedy. When final silence enveloped the house, the 2 perpetrators began to carry out their original purpose, searching for property. They ransacked everywhere, taking the most portable items, Mrs. Giamchit's jewelry, and a collection of about 400 Buddha statues and antique prayer beads that Mr. Praphat had passionately collected over many years. But despite searching every nook and cranny in the house, they still found no cash. The rumor about the 1 million baht turned out to be completely baseless gossip. Mr. Praphat had never sold land, never sold fighting bulls to obtain such a large sum of money. So it was only because of greed for non-existent money that both criminals had mercilessly killed 5 innocent people. A respectable family beloved by the entire community had been erased in an unforgivable tragedy. Among the most haunting questions this case left behind, perhaps nothing was more pressing than understanding the motivation that could drive a human being to become so brutal. In his confession, Sak Pakro insisted his initial motive was entirely just to rob money. He declared he had no grudge against the victim's family. This was just a business deal aimed at profit. But this dry explanation could hardly convince the public. The level of brutality far exceeded any limits of ordinary robbery. The systematic killing of women and children had caused public outrage. People asked themselves, how could a human being become so cold-blooded? To find the answer, psychological experts delved deep into Sak's background, and what they discovered created a haunting picture of a killer's formation. From childhood, Sak had experienced severe psychological trauma, laying the foundation for later behavioral disorders. The fateful event occurred when Sak was only 5 years old. While home alone, the little boy encountered a burglar breaking in. The intruder had tied up the child, stuffed cloth in his mouth, and locked him in the house for hours. Only when his parents returned from the fields was Sak freed from the nightmare. This event left deep psychological wounds in a child's soul. Fear, helplessness, and perhaps anger had begun to corrode Sak's spirit from very early on. As he grew up, abnormal signs in Sak's character became increasingly clear. He became hot-tempered, often using violence to solve all problems. The climax of this transformation was clearly demonstrated in an incident when Sak was 16 years old. Just because of a trivial dispute with a neighbor about a cow eating vegetables in the garden, Sak had killed the animal and hung it from a tree. These details made the public wonder painfully. Had childhood tragedy turned Sak into a demon in human form? Had the psychological trauma from childhood caused him to vent his hatred of life on innocent families like Mr. Praphat's family? Meanwhile, Songkran's story carried a completely different color. Unlike his accomplice with a traumatic past, Songkran came from an ordinary, poor working family. He was an average student, neither outstanding academically nor showing any abnormal signs in character from childhood. However, it was precisely the lack of direction and an unhealthy social environment that gradually pushed him onto the wrong path. Psychological experts analyzed that Songkran was a typical case of a teenager being led astray by bad influences, lacking the backbone to refuse seemingly attractive but dangerous temptations. Although not directly involved in the killings, Songkran had played an active accessory role in the robbery plan. His participation did not stem from cold-blooded nature like Sak, but mainly from naivety, lack of understanding of consequences, and poor judgment about the seriousness of the actions he was participating in. Experts determined that Songkran's case reflected a broader social problem: the ease with which young people can be influenced by negative environments and the lack of proper educational guidance. This shocking massacre was quickly brought to trial in a mobile court session in late 1997. The decision to hold a mobile trial was not only to ensure publicity and transparency, but also to demonstrate the judicial system's determination to punish barbaric crimes. The level of brutality and serious nature of the case had attracted special attention from all of Thai society. Thousands of Thai people from all over had flocked to follow the trial, turning it into an event that captured the attention of the entire nation. Among them, many people from remote areas had left their jobs and traveled hundreds of miles to witness firsthand the two criminals paying for their cruel acts. At the first trial, the judging panel determined that this was one of the most cold-blooded and inhumane cases ever recorded in southern Thailand. The brutality exceeding all limits of crime left no room for mercy. Sak Pakro, the mastermind and direct perpetrator of the killings, received the death penalty, the strictest sentence in the Thai legal system. Meanwhile, Songkran enjoyed provisions for minors, escaping the death penalty for committing crimes while under 18. However, the court still sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole, showing severity toward his role as an accomplice in particularly serious crimes. The moment of sentencing created a strong wave of emotion in the courtroom. Thunderous applause from the audience erupted like a release after long months of indignation and grief. For many people, this was the implementation of justice they had hoped for, a fitting response to unforgivable crimes. However, both defendants used their right to appeal to the appellate court. Their hope of changing their fate was once again dashed when the appellate court decided to maintain the sentences: death for Sak and life imprisonment for Songkran. It seemed the book of justice had closed, but then 2001 brought an unpredictable turning point. Sak Pakro had decided to gamble with his last chance, filing an appeal to Thailand's Supreme Court. This was the final line, the only opportunity to change his predetermined fate. And then the unthinkable happened. The Supreme Court, after careful consideration, made a shocking decision. They determined that Sak's cooperative attitude throughout the investigation process was a factor worthy of consideration. He had sincerely confessed from the beginning, not denying or obstructing the investigation. Especially, his detailed confession had helped police identify and arrest Songkran, while also clarifying the entire complex development of the case. Based on these mitigating circumstances, the panel of judges made a shocking decision: reduce the death sentence to life imprisonment. This decision was like a bomb exploding in public opinion, creating a fierce wave of opposition throughout Thailand. The public's outrage was completely understandable. In the eyes of millions of citizens, allowing a man who had massacred 5 innocent people, including 3 small children, to be spared with his life was unacceptable. Many considered this a serious insult to justice, a humiliation of the deceased victims and their families. Although the Thai legal system had provisions allowing for mitigating circumstances, applying them to a cold-blooded killer like Sak had exceeded the limits of public acceptance. They believed no mitigating circumstances could compensate for the horrific brutality he had caused. However, in the judicial system, when the Supreme Court had pronounced sentence, that decision became final and could not be changed. Sak Pakro had officially escaped the death penalty and faced life imprisonment. Initially, Sak was held at Bang Kwang prison, a name that made even hardened criminals shudder, with harsh management and discipline so strict it was brutal. Life here was like hell on earth, where each passing day was a survival test. After some time, he was transferred to Songkhla Provincial Prison, closer to his hometown. Here, Sak would continue serving his life sentence until the end of his days. Many people believed the life sentence was excessive mercy for this cold-blooded killer, but reality showed the story was much more ironic. The Thai judicial system has a special provision. Prisoners showing good rehabilitation can be pardoned by the king or have their sentences reduced during periodic special amnesties. And Sak Pakro, with his cunning intelligence and inherent manipulative nature, had quickly grasped this rule of the game. Throughout his imprisonment, he had transformed himself into an exemplary prisoner to an astonishing degree. Not one disciplinary violation, not one instance of troublemaking. He even actively participated in rehabilitation activities, showing a repentant spirit perfectly. This charade had worked. By 2013, after only 16 years in prison, Sak had been granted sentence reduction and early release. This number is truly worth pondering. 16 years in prison for 5 innocent lives, calculating that each life was only worth 3.2 years in prison. When he stepped out of the prison gates as a newly rehabilitated person, Sak immediately implemented a systematic plan to erase his past. The first step was completely changing his identity. From Sak Pakro, a name associated with the shocking massacre, he became Nedirath Novawang, a completely new person on paper. He didn't stop there. He also moved to a completely unfamiliar place, cutting all contact with anyone who had known the name Sak Pakro and the horrific crime he had committed. Not long after his release, Sak did not reform as his rehabilitation record had indicated. Instead, he continued to delve into the underworld. He joined a notorious gang, becoming a bodyguard and hired assassin for local bosses. His new identity meant that no one outside the underworld knew this man was the perpetrator of the 5-person massacre that had once shocked all of southern Thailand. In 2015, Sak moved to a border district, setting up a new facade, a businessman in ornamental plant exports. But behind this screen, he continued protection rackets, smuggling, and involvement with Thai-Malaysian cross-border criminal groups. He had been investigated for forest encroachment, had escaped after being shot at by rival gangs as a warning, and it seemed the law of karma had begun sending signals to the one who had once escaped the death penalty. And then on the morning of February 22, 2015, 2 strangers appeared at the door of Nedirath's house, who was Sak Pakro from the past. When he had just stepped outside, they immediately opened fire directly at him in front of shocked neighbors. Sak collapsed in a pool of blood and died on the way to the hospital. The investigation into the death of Nedirath, Sak Pakro, quickly reached a conclusion. This incident had no connection to the Bunthawee family or crimes from the past. Instead, police determined this was the consequence of deep conflicts in the underworld, power and profit disputes between criminal gangs operating in the border region. This fateful coincidence made Thai public opinion stir. They called this the price paid by the law of karma, a profound concept in Buddhist culture about how evil actions will sooner or later receive consequences. Major newspapers did not hesitate to use headlines rich in philosophical meaning to describe this event. Sow the wind, reap the whirlwind, Sak Pakro shot down under heaven's net, that though sparse is hard to escape. A headline that not only summarized the event, but also expressed deep faith in the law of universal cause and effect. Although no one in civilized society could publicly support violence outside the law, public reaction revealed a more complex reality. Most people did not hide their satisfaction when learning of Sak's death. For them, this was not an ordinary murder case, but a correction of justice, an ending they believed was deserved for someone who had unfairly escaped the death penalty. As for Songkran, although he had never personally killed anyone, because he was an accomplice and had aided the entire plan, he also began a long journey of repentance behind bars. His youth ended when he entered prison to pay for the horrific mistake made on one fateful afternoon. He was reported to have completed his sentence in the late 2010s after serving 15 years. According to some unofficial sources, Songkran had been living anonymously, avoiding media, withdrawing from society like a shadow. Perhaps that was the only way for him to atone for the youthful mistake he could never erase. And that is today's case. Thank you for following along, and see you in the next videos.